Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, we have something a little different, a little unique, something that was requested by a player, and that is a Dragonknight fire staff tank. I know a lot of people are going to be like, what? This isn't possible. No, it works great. It's an awesome build. It's something I used to play in the past, but I've made some adjustments to it because of some of the changes I made to some of the sets and a few other things. So it's a really interesting build. It works very much like the Northern Wind, but instead of being focused on survivability through high shields and stuff, it's more or less through more bringing the pain than anything else. This is called the Ragefire Dragonknight tank. So let's go ahead and take a look at the build itself. As you can see, we are an Argonian with this. Argonian is one of the better choices for this build, and it's primarily because of the amount of resources these guys can keep coming in with their potions. But they also get an increased max magicka and increased health, and that really plays well into the build. Now, you don't have to worry about high resistances with this build because you do reach the resistance cap pretty easily with the way this build's set up. So, as you can see, we have 64 or 60 in the magicka. Now, you can set your attributes pretty much to your liking. I like having a higher magicka pool, mainly because I like to use a lot of igneous shields and other abilities with this build. So having the higher pool allows me that bigger resource to have that active more often. But the build does play a little crazy compared to what I have done in the past with some builds, but you guys will figure it out pretty well. We do have 4 into health. This gives us a 30k magicka and a 28k health. Now, a lot of people are going to say your health is too low to tank anything, but you have to understand this build is made to not only tank but also solo play as well, and it's very powerful at both. So it can solo play really well and it can tank really well. We do have 17k stamina. This is primarily at this point for blocking, and you are wearing sturdy gear, and like I said, you are using fire staves, so you are going to have some blocking that you will be doing. A tank does not play without blocking. So we do have a 1913 spell damage and a 43% spell critical. There is a reason for the high spell crit, you guys will see in a minute. 21k spell resistance with a 20k physical resist, and this is unbuffed. When we buff up, and I will just go ahead and show you guys that so you can see. Oops, wrong one. You can see we go to 27, 25. Now this looks low to a lot of people, but trust me, it's going to get higher. We do have Major Prophecy at all times on both bars, and we do have the Thief Mundus Stone for the higher spell critical. Now, you could go with a different Mundus Stone if you wanted like higher mag recovery, or if you wanted something else like, say, higher health. You could go with the Lord. It's really up to you. I like using the Thief Mundus Stone because I like that higher crit chance because it plays super well into this build. Next, we have Tri-Stat Food, of course. It's always perfect. And then moving on to our equipment, we have tripods. Tripods are going to be the best thing for this build because you're going to get 3 resources back no matter what when you use one. But being an Argonian, you're going to get extra resources back, so it's going to keep you pretty much capped out in resources easily. And you will be using these off of cooldown because you want to keep that major fortitude, major endurance, and major health recovery stuff all the time. You want to keep that, like the major fortitude, major intellect, major endurance, yeah, all the time. That 20% recovery plays well into how this build works. Alright, going over the sets, starting with the monster set. It's a given on this build, Grothdar. Grothdar is great for solo play and small group play, because this isn't really a raid tank. This is more of a small group tank and a solo play tank. And the reason for Grothdar is it does a lot of AoE damage, but on top of that, it also gives you some magicka. So not only does it help you with your group's damage and your own damage, it helps with keeping your magicka pool at a higher rate. So It's a nice benefit. Moving on to the next set, of course, Julianus is going to be there. You guys should have known this. Spell crit, max magicka, spell crit, and spell damage on the total setup. And that 5-piece bonus at 300 spell damage really plays well into this build setup. Alright, moving on now to the final set, and this is where things are get changed from what it was in the past. We are using Ember Shield now. Ember Shield is a really, really good set now. 2-piece, 3-piece max health, 4-piece gives you extra armor, and then the 5-piece. When you deal damage with a fully charged heavy attack, you have a 50, remember that, it's a 50% chance to increase your physical and spell resistance by 3,440 and deal 1,382 flame damage to all enemies within 5 meters of you every second for 6 seconds. This setup with Ember Shield, Grothar together in combination with each other is explosive. But not only is it explosive, it is very good for solo play because it's giving you that higher DPS output, it's giving you that higher survivability with Ember Shield, and then Grothar is giving you the higher DPS. And then of course with the high crit chance, you're getting higher crits from your own abilities. It doesn't apply to these sets, but it does apply to your own abilities. So you're getting high crit damage from all your abilities, plus you're getting this, or a higher crit damage percentage, plus you're getting all these other damage amplifiers. So it's just stacking up damage, and it works out really well. Alright, now we're going to go over traits and enchants, starting with the monster set. We do have tri-stats on the helm, chest, and legs, and this is going to give you that really good amount of widespread resources. And then on the smaller pieces, we are running healthy with sturdy trait. This is going to give you higher block cost reduction, and it's going to give you a better health pool. Now the helm and the legs, we are using invigorating, of course, for the higher mag health and stamina recovery. That's how we get that 998, almost 1,000 recovery. When we buff up with our potion, we actually go over 1,000 recovery, and this helps us sustain really well because we are doing a lot of heavy attacking with this build. So getting that heavy attack, which takes 2 seconds, which is the amount of time it takes for resources to come in, your recovery resources, and then your heavy attack on top of it gives you just a chunk of magicka that allows you to sustain really well. We have reinforced on the chest piece. This is going to increase the armor value of the heavy chest to its maximum, and this is going to help keep your resistances high. So that's why we do that. And the rest of this is not even a question. You're going to really want to go with that higher block cost, especially with the amount of blocking a tank does do, and the fact that your resources on that is primarily stamina. So alright, moving on to the jewelry. The 2 rings are Trirune with magic recovery. Now, I tried this with 2 spell damage here. I tried it with block cost reductions. Block cost reductions doesn't change the value too much. Not enough to make it worthwhile, to be honest. If you had a lot of block cost reduction, like all your pieces were sturdy, all that kind of stuff, then the block cost ones are great for it. But we're not looking for a high block build. We're looking for something that can sustain and stay alive. So that higher recovery really plays well into the build. And then on the last piece, we have an infused necklace with a spell damage enchant, because this way we can get our spell damage up to about 2k, which is perfect for the way this build plays. Alright, moving on to the weapons, we have 2 fire staffs. Both of them are infused. As you can see, one is hardening enchant. This gives you a almost 5k damage shield. And then we have a Crusher enchant, which gives you physical and spell resistance reduction on your enemies by 2,108. This helps increase DPS not only for you and your group, but for anyone who attacks the target. So it's just really good overall. Alright, moving on now to the next thing we have, which is our skills. And skills, really optional on the first skill here on the bar. This is a floater skill. So there's several different skills you can put here. You can put Crushing Weapon, you can put Molten Whip, you can put Burning Embers like I have. You can even put Unrelenting Grip if you want that pull right there. But the way this build is set up right now is primarily for tanking in small groups. Not tanking a raid, or a trial or anything like that. It's just tanking in small groups, doing world bosses, doing delves, doing public dungeons, doing dungeons on normal, veteran, and all non-DLC dungeons on hard mode. If you get good enough with the build, hard mode on DLC dungeons isn't too difficult if you know how to play the build really well, and it does work out. Alright, starting with our skills though, the first ability we have, Burning Embers. This is a great damage ability. It does damage up front, damage over 14 seconds. It also heals you when the effect ends, and it's whenever the effect ends. So if you activate this and then a few seconds activate it again, it's going to give you a good burst heal. It's really good for keeping you alive. Enemies hit are also afflicted with burning status effect from the initial hit. Next, we have Engulfing Flames. This is a really good ability. It does damage up front, damage over time, and then it also applies a increase to damage of 10% for the whole group. So it's really good for that factor. Next up, we have Igneous Shield. This is our primary defense ability. We're going to be using this a lot. You're going to want to keep this up pretty much, not 100%, but you're going to want to keep it up as much as possible, especially in those hard-hitting fights, because this is going to be your main mitigation tool. So, not just blocking, but this as well. It also gives you, besides the 2,832 damage shield and a 7,000 shield, it also gives you Major Mending, which increases your healing done by 25%. Being an Argonian, you get increased healing done and healing received, I believe, still 5%, which is great. And then we have Green Dragon's Blood. This gives you Major Fortitude and Major Vitality, increasing healing recovery and stam recovery by 20%. That stam recovery plays really well. It gives you the stam recovery by 20% and healing received by 8%. So this plays really well into how the build works, because you're going to be using Green Dragon's Blood to keep the heal from your Burning Embers applied. Last ability we have on the bar, and this is not an optional ability, you have to have this ability here. This is Carterize. Now this does a heal every 5 seconds to you and someone else. It does apply it to one or the other. It does give you Major Prophecy at all times for having it slotted, so that's why we have it on both bars. Next ability we have, and this is what the build is built literally around, and that is the Standard of Might. This is why it's called the Ragefire build. When you put this down, it not only increases your damage done by 15%, but it also reduces the incoming damage you take by 10%. It does flame damage every second for 20 seconds, the full duration, and then it's also a great synergy for your allies. So it's an awesome ability for both. Moving on to the back bar, and the back bar pretty much is set in stone besides one ability, and the rest of it you want to pretty much keep as is. So we have Eruption. This is a great CC ability. A lot of people are like, 70% movement speed reduction for 18 seconds doesn't really help. It does if you want to keep mobs like in a location and you want to keep them slowed. This is a great way to do that. So what you do is when you run into a room, you drop this down right on a pack of mobs, and it's going to make it harder for them to spread out. In fact, most of the time they'll come rushing you because it does fire damage up front, and it does fire damage every second for 18 seconds. So it's a nice aggro builder. If you wanted to, you could swap this out with the Draconic ability, Choking Talons. This is another great ability. It also applies Minor Maim to the enemies, reducing incoming damage for by 15% for 10 seconds. And does a decent amount of magic damage because it is also a synergy. So that's another one you can put there as well. Next ability we have is Blockade of Fire. This is a hands down ability you're really going to want to keep up, because this is what's going to keep your Crusher applied to multiple targets, not just one, but multiples. So this is a really great ability for doing that. It also, burning enemies take 20% more damage from this ability. You will be burning enemies. This helps your DPS, helps your group's DPS. It's overall really good. Next ability is the main floater ability. So Molten Armaments is a great ability, or a great thing for you, because it increases your own heavy attack damage by 50% while active, and it does give you and your allies in a 28 meter radius increase weapon and spell damage by 20% for 36 seconds. So this is actually a long-lasting major brutality, major sorcery buff, but on top of that, it increases your own damage by 50%. It's a nice ability to have, but you can swap this out for other abilities. There are some that will help. Group support, things like that, like Deep Breath's an ability I like to use sometimes because of what it does, and how it can control a group, and the fact that it can also like knock enemies off balance and stun them for 2 seconds. It's like using a crusher or crushing weapon from your own staff. You can put Pulsar here. Ardent Flame if you wanted to, Unrelenting Grip, so you have a pull to pull enemies to you. This is another great ability to put in its place, but you never know. It's up to the player. Next ability we have is Hardened Armor. Now this is a great ability. Gives you major gives you major resolve. Increases spell and physical resist by 5,280 for 20 seconds. Damage, you gain a damage shield that absorbs 5,142 damage for 6 seconds, and it's based off your max health. And then when you activate, while active, the armor returns magic damage to the enemy that uses a direct damage attack against you in melee range. So any melee attack that hits you up close is going to be taking magic damage, and that does, with all the other damage you have going on, amplifies your damage done. So it's a nice way to keep the outgoing damage with the incoming damage. So it's a nice way to kind of swap those out. Again, Carterize, you want that high spell crit on both bars. The reason for that is most of your abilities are magic based, so this increases your spell crit. So getting that higher spell damage really helps you. It helps your group stay alive. It increases your damage output. It increases your critical healing, all that stuff. Next, we have Aggressive Horn. If you want that group buff to increase max magic and stamina by 10% for 30 seconds, and of course that Major Force, increasing critical damage by 15% for 10 seconds. Now this does apply to you really well, and it's a nice buff to use in a group situation. If you're out and soloing by yourself, the banner's just as good, because it's going to give you 15% increase to all damage types, and that doesn't matter whether it's crit or non-crit. It's going to increase all your damage by 15% and reduce your incoming damage by 15%. So this is going to help keep you alive, and it's going to keep your outgoing damage good. So it's a nice benefit for you in a solo play situation. In group situations, Aggressive Horn might work out better. Alright, now that I've shown you the skills, I do want to say this: make sure you unlock all your class passives, weapon passives, armor passives. And this doesn't just mean like the first three of the light armor, medium armor, heavy armor. Just unlock all of them. So if you ever switch this build to a damage dealing build, you have the light armor passives already. Or if you switch this to a medium armor build, you have the medium armor passives. Same thing with the heavy armor. When it comes to guild skills, Finder's Guild, I do unlock all the abilities and the passives. The reason for this is depending on how I play the build. Like if I play the build with a melee setup where I'm using sword and shield, or I'm using other things, using some of these abilities, especially in like a PvP situation, Dawnbreaker's Smiting is really great at that. Bard Trap can give me minor force that can increase my DPS while solo playing. Mage's Guild, Shooting Star, Inner Light, Structured Entropy, Volcanic Ruin. Volcanic Ruin is a really good CC, especially in PvE and in PvP if you're looking for something to control enemies. It's really good for that. Balance is a really good resistance buff, and it does take health and causes magic, whatever, or gives you magic. It's a good buff for that. Then of course we have all of our Psijic Order stuff here and passives unlocked. And always make sure you unlock your passives for anything that you unlock skills for, because those passives amplify your skills. So, active abilities here in the Undaunted line, I do have all of them unlocked. Inner Rage is going to be your primary taunt. And just to let you know, when you are tanking, you are going to want to put Inner Rage on your front bar. You're going to want to change out that Burning Embers for Inner Rage. This is how you get your range taunt and stuff like that, because otherwise you don't have a taunt. So always make sure you have Inner Rage on the front bar. Alliance War, of course, again, Assault, Support, just the skills and abilities you need for PvE. You don't even need to worry about unlocking the PvP stuff. So And then, of course, being an Argonian, we do get the Life Mender, which increases our healing done. Okay, so healing done by 6%. I forgot they changed that. Argonian resistance increases max health and increases disease resistance, and you gain disease status effect, immunity to disease status effect. You also get resourceful, which increases your max magic by 1,000, and then anytime you drink a potion, it restores 4,000 health, magic, and stamina, and these can also be amplified by CP. Then we have alchemy, medicinal use, and then provisioning, gourmand, and connoisseur. You're going to want to make sure you get these things unlocked when you can. Don't be in a rush, but do get them unlocked by the time you are doing dungeons, because they do help out. Alright, now that I've shown you the skills, we're going to go over to our champion points. In our champion points, we have a very, very basic setup. So, 56 in Ironclad, this increases or reduces your damage taken from direct damage attacks by 20%. We do have 8 in the Spell Shield. This increases spell resistance by 811. Moving on over here, we have 31 into Thick Skin. It reduces your damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%. 43 into Hardy, reducing physical damage, poison, disease by 10%. And then 43 in Elemental Defender, reduces frost, shock, and magic damage by 10%. Now remember, these two here do stack with Thick Skinned and Ironclad, so you are getting a decent amount of damage reduction. But when you drop that banner, you get another 15% added to this here, so you actually go to 25% damage reduction on top of these other ones. So it's really good to have that banner up as much as possible. Moving on, we have 40 in the Bastion. This increases your damage shield strength by 16%. This does help a lot, especially with the Igneous Shield. And then we have 19 into Quick Recovery, increasing our healing received by 5%. And then we have 30 into Heavy Armor Focus. This increases your physical resistance by 2,692 while wearing 5 or more pieces of heavy armor. This is a full 5-piece heavy armor build with a light belt and a medium helm. Moving on, we have 40 in the Warlord, reducing break free cost by 16%. We have 16 in the Sprinter, reducing sprint cost by 10%. 16 in the Bashing Focus, reducing bash cost by 10%. Moving on to the middle green tree, we have 43 in Arcanus. This increases mag recovery by 10%. And then 75 in the Tenacity. This increases the return of magic and stamina of your fully charged heavy attacks by 14%. Moving on, we have 40 in the Tumbling, reduces dodge roll cost by 16%, and 40 in the Shadow Ward, reducing block cost by 16%. We actually have a total of like a 30-something% block cost reduction, but you're not going to be blocking everything. Like I said, this build is more of a offensive tank than it is a defensive tank. You're using shields and stuff primarily to defend, while blocking is there to defend major hits that you need to block, like heavy attacks, things like that, to set enemies off balance. If you're a tank, you know what I'm talking about. So, moving on to the blue tree, 43 in the Blessed, increases healing done by 10%. This does get increased by another 6% for being Argonian. So this is why Argonian is really well with this build, because you have all these heals that are healing you and your allies or whatever, and it just helps out. Next, we have 56 in the Elfborn. This increases critical damage and critical healing done by 20. And we have 56 into Elemental Expert. This increases flame, frost, shock, and magic done by 12%. Middle tree here, 35 in the Staff Expert. This increases your light and heavy attack damage by 20%. And then 40 with 40 points of Master Arm, increases your direct damage done by 16%. Direct damage done with Fire Staff is your light and heavy attacks. So it really plays well in there. Then we have Retaliation, Riposte, and, of course, Butcher. Moving on to the final tree, we have 40 in the Thaumaturge, and this increases your damage done with damage over time effects by 16%. Now, this does amplify your damage done with your sets as well. This here and this right here does increase the damage that you do over time, even with sets. But not this. Just those two things. So that's why those things look like they do increased damage. Alright, now that I've shown you guys that stuff, you guys probably want to see what this build looks like in action. So we're going to go ahead and take a trip over to one of my favorite testing grounds, which is a dungeon called Depths of Malatar. Again, I will explain why I use this dungeon. It's really easy to get to the first boss encounter, and so it makes it a lot quicker for me to show you trash fighting, and then on top of that, a boss encounter fight, so you guys can see its survivability and its effectiveness in that kind of setting. Now, again, remember, this build plays really heavily on heavy attacks, so make sure you keep your heavy attacks up as much as possible. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and head in here. I'm going to go ahead and swap out my back to my back bar so I can get my buffs ready. Alright, opening the door. Going to hit our first buff, second buff, and now we're going to drop our AoEs. And as you can see, my heavy attacks are returning quite a bit of resources there. And my heavy attacks are also doing quite a bit of damage to these guys in the fact that they just do a lot of damage. So, now remember, anytime you heavy attack, you have a 50% chance of proccing the one buff, and it's going to increase your resistances. So try to keep that up as much as you can, the heavy attacks, so you can get that. So here we go, crushers on all these guys. We put down that wall of elements. We're going to walk into the middle of them so we can get that higher, again, damage output on them. There we go. We got all this AoE damage going, and again, you can see I get pretty decent amount of resistances, so down and down. Alright, so now we're going to go over here and we're going to take on the boss, and this is, like I said, this is why I use this, because the boss is right here. So let's get in here and find him. Some DBS going on. We can find him. Where are you hiding, big ugly guy? Oh, I probably walked right by him and didn't even notice. I do that quite a bit. There we go. And just to show you guys the banner thing that I was talking about, so you're going to want to stay in the banner's range, like, and it with the even with all the damage reduction you have going on, and him dropping all these AoEs and stuff, doesn't matter, because you can still survive that stuff, at least in normal difficulty. In veteran, you might have to move around a little bit more, but not by much. And I am going to have to let him kill me, because if I don't, he'll wind up disappearing, and then I got to go hunt him down again. But as you can see, the build works out really well. You do just have to focus a lot on heavy attacks, and I didn't even use a potion while I was in here, so go ahead and Way Shrine. But that's pretty much the build. This is the Ragefire Dragonknight tank, and like I said, it's great for solo play. It's great for small group play. Not so great, I will say, in trial play, but this build can take on Maelstrom Arena on both normal and veteran. Don't know about hard mode, never tried it. And I really just tried it in hard mode, or in veteran mode, in the normal mode, just to see how far I could get with it in the past. And in the past, I used to be able to get all the way to the final boss encounter in veteran mode, with some offsets depending on the situation, depending on on just my own player ability. And knowing of that, and then it's great in Dragon Star Arena. It's great in the new Black Rose Prison Arena, and also it is really good in one trial, and that is the one in Clockwork City. It is actually good in there on normal play, so you can actually go do that on normal with a group. It works out really well. It's actually really powerful build for that, and it'll allow you to get the imperfect weapons, at least, from the trial. So it's really good for that. And like I said, I haven't tried it in any other trial settings besides that one. So, but it probably could work out in the other trials on normal. Don't know so much about veteran or hard mode, because you got to remember, hard mode on a lot of the content is just the final boss. Veteran mode is what you're going to be facing most of the time, or normal mode. Veteran content is a little bit more difficult than normal content, depending on if it's non-DLC or DLC. But that's pretty much the build. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, you guys know what's coming next. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more builds by me or other videos by me, you can subscribe. I do post videos on a regular basis, and if you click that notification bell, it will notify you when I post new videos. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.